Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to another episode of Endurance Chat. I am Kris Washer 97, and with me by my side here is going to be Cookie Monster FL. How are you doing tonight, Cookie?
I'm doing great. We get to talk about sports car racing and specifically our Daytona weekend that we had over here in the States. And then, and this is kind of like a crazy episode too, because then we're going to throw it like out to the other side of the world to hear a report down in Australia land. And from the guys down there, right, Kris? I think that's what's happening.
So me and Cookie will go on in your ears for an hour about the Daytona 24, and then we'll throw it out to the other side of the world with Pee-wee Kris and Floodman 11, or Michael Zalafari, and they'll talk about the Bathurst 12-hour. So it's just Bathurst and Daytona for this episode. Next time you'll see me and Cookie. I believe we'll probably talk a bit in depth about the Asian Le Mans series and how that turned out, because Le Mans invites were on the line, and some short reviews of Kyalami and other sort of stuff, and also a Sebring preview. That's coming up soon. So we'll gather on all those other topics, but for right now it's just Daytona. And speaking of Daytona, how was it? How was your experience at the track?
I was like, how was it? I think I watched it. Oh, wait a sec. That's right. I was there. It was great. It was extremely packed. Definitely the most I've seen ever there in terms of going to a IMSA event. I mean, from what I could gather in the grandstands, the amount of fans that were in there seemed almost parallel or clearly more than the Xfinity race that were there just to see that one. I mean, Daytona 500 looked insane. I mean that from talking about last weekend's Daytona 500 and that weekend. Just the amount of fans that were there. I heard there was some amount of estimated total admissions was like somewhere in the 48,000 for a day, which I think would have broken an IMSA record at Daytona. Don't quote me. I don't even know where I heard that, but it was like 48,000 attendance per day or something like that. At least that was announced on Saturday or Sunday. I could be wrong, but it was just extremely packed. The turn 1-2 outside camping area, it seemed like that got expanded, or at least they utilized a lot more space. They opened it up, I would say, within the last 3 or 4 weeks before the event, and allowed more camping opportunity there. I want to give a shout out to anybody who camped way that far out and outside of like Daytona NASCAR Turn 2, because that was a long walk. I mean, that was like a 40-minute walk to get to where the trams were to take you in the infield just to get there. Like, it was I would not have wanted to be out there, but we were in infield NASCAR Turn 3, kind of our usual spot, and it was great. Wasn't sure if I was going to make it. Had some issues with the car, but that got fixed by Ren Sports local repair shop in Florida here where I live, which was crazy. They had a mural of a bunch of GT and Le Mans cars, and of course a Glickenhaus, because I guess they did some servicing with it in the Nürburgring 24-hour race. The what is it? The 003, I think, or the 002. So it was crazy. I took pictures for the guy because he was like, well, I'll get you there before the 24. Don't worry. Because I was like, I need to use this car to get there, man. He's like, we'll be good. And then, I had like I think it was a turbo, like kind of exhaust or like piping, exhaust pipe or intake. I'm sorry. And, that popped off like when I was going under the track, NASCAR Turn 1. So we did a little infield repair. Indecisive Rock decided to help out and get under my car and jack it up with my like roadside jack, and we fixed it. But yeah, it was a great Daytona weekend. And it always has an interesting and unique experience. This year, the amount of fans that were at the track was incredible. The atmosphere was just very vibrant. There was just a lot of people, really, really high hopes. Like you could just tell people were really excited, and definitely the better temperatures helped all weekend. I mean, we really didn't have any issues like we have had in the last few years in terms of weather. The weather literally got better as the weekend rolled on, and we even ended with basically like a normal, almost Florida spring, 80s and whatnot on Sunday. So it was a fantastic race to attend. I still feel like my earlier concerns about Daytona's handling of some of the crowd stuff could probably have been handled a little bit better too, and hopefully this is just more things to come of them just kind of giving more expanded area for people to go to still be able to attend the event in person, because I think it is such a unique event, and there are so many opportunities to see sports cars in a different, unique way here that they're putting in a good product. So that was a little mini rant, but yeah, I absolutely enjoyed attending the Rolex 24. Plus all the other races that were held by Support Series, not to mention the 2MX5 races, and then Michelin Pilot Sports Challenge race.
I'll tell you, Cookie, the people who didn't enjoy the Rolex 24, a Porsche, that's something that was a huge talking point all week about the BOP of the Porsches, and obviously people are like, oh, are they sandbagging? And and people are on the other camp of, no, they should give them a boost. Well, the people who said they should have gave them a boost, they were right. As we saw during the race, the Porsches were very uncompetitive, especially with that straight line section on Sector 3 with the whole high bank of the NASCAR 3 and 4. It wasn't good, and I'm afraid.
I completely agree with you. I think the BOP just ended up being wrong to begin with. I understand there is sort of a precedent set that the FIA kind of do this, the ACO with their BOP handling. I've seen Corvette basically kind of get sent to the back so many different times in the WC for their one-off stuff. I'm not blaming them or anything like that, but I think the way that the WC specifically has always approached BOP has been like a slow and steady approach. And if you're homologating a new car, that doesn't immediately make it fast. And I think I'm fine with that. I think the thing that rubs people wrong is that they're brand new cars and that you're trying to set everybody up fairly. And this is... It's just an anticlimactic way to introduce a new car, which should have its own strengths, its own improvements, and the car could straight up potentially be slower than its last year's car if it just stayed in, with not upgrading anything and just running another year's homologation worth. Like that definitely rubs people the wrong way, whether that's right or wrong. I kind of err to the side of, I think, if anything, IMSA should at least be slightly nudging numbers correctly towards some of these manufacturers' way, but not in any amount of crazy modifications. I mean, like a 5% change, like in whatever relative thing that they're doing. I'm not, and that's even of a small window of a small part of that entire car. I just think that with Porsche being so far behind, throughout at least the Roar, what we saw, and then the first practice sessions, they at least should have had a minuscule assistance just to at least, even though it wouldn't have been appreciated that much, it still would have been easier on the cars. And then at least it gives the governing body a chance to look at all the original data they had, compare the 5% potential performance delta on X wing or something like that, and then go from there. And at least if they do have terrible BOP through the race, they're at least 5% faster than they, their performance delta was increased by 5% kind of thing. And that can at least be visual in the IMSA thing. But that's what jars me so much, is because I feel like the way that the WC does it is because they have that auto BOP thing where you're like, okay, well, I see more hammer swings sometimes when it comes to WC than with IMSA, at least when it comes to performance, adjusting new cars. IMSA definitely takes more swings, I feel like, for individual performance for races and stuff than WC does. But I do feel like WC have a structured approach with this. And while it is annoying and frustrating, new cars do end up potentially being good through that start of year. At least for what they were doing here at Daytona, that was they had zero chance. And I just feel like, if you even gave them a 1 or 2% chance, it didn't give them a bone, but you gave them a little, just a tiny piece of meat or something, then at least that's enough to go okay, like, based on the results that we saw, yes, we made a mistake on BOP. Here's how we found out about that in terms of, like, what we were expecting deltas and what we got. And we're going to move on from there and be fine. Like, but at the same time, I don't think it's something that's going to bother me too much at the end of the day, because I do feel like this will be quickly ironed out. I don't know, you know, I feel the frustration of people that definitely want to see those cars do better. And the 296 didn't really do too well either, but that probably could be more said for them just getting hit by other cars than anything else. So, but yeah, the Porsches being that far off definitely were not, it wasn't a good look, especially for how many there were out there. Like, it just, and to have no adjustments really given to them at all throughout the entire process after it was already set was kind of, it just, again, it rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. Like, why couldn't you just at least do a testing freebie for them somewhere where they're just at least, they're getting slightly faster here, but losing some there. So at least it makes it look like you're doing something by just getting more data instead of just doing nothing and be like, they're bluffing and then being wrong. I'm in a rant mood tonight, Kris.
And for clarification, we were talking about the GT cars for Porsche.
Yes.
The
GTD cars.
The 963 for Porsche. Actually, it fared relatively well on pace on the mechanical side of things, on the reliability side of things, maybe not so much. But yeah, I think probably taken too long to get to this. But obviously, debut race for GTP LMDH cars, very, very big in this new generation of sports car racing. Since you were at the track and I was watching on TV, like how do these compare to, let's say, the DPI cars?
Better. They're better. I would say there's not a really high screeching kind of noise, but otherwise every single manufacturer has their own unique sound to it. You can tell that the speed is a little bit faster in terms of like last year to this year. Just even being at the campsite and seeing them on the banking, you can just tell that they're a little bit faster. They just look more aggressive too. So I think that ultimately, you know, even though they might not be as fast as we once knew them to be, because these are all new cars, they're gonna be crowd favorites. I feel like it'll be nice to see other cars come online as well, and I would expect to see some potential LMHs make some appearances as well, which should really help kind of colorize the field. But yeah, as a first race, they were great. The Cadillac sounded awesome. I sort of like the Porsche. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but just the sound of it. But they all look great, and I think they definitely do add a lot more kind of, I don't want to say international flair, but you can definitely tell that these things mean a little bit more business than the previous ones, and I think it also helped the gravitas of the fact that like a lot of these cars are going to Le Mans too, and that helped. So I also the LED bars and stuff like that. I think all the OEMs are starting to go naturally crazy with the LEDs and their schemes and stuff. So the Porsche like flat bar in the back and just like some of the fronts, like the BMWs, like they all look like these weird, interesting light shows now coming past you. So even on the banking and in the infield, they were just like, they look like spaceships. I don't want to say again, but you definitely felt like, oh god, these things are going to go really fast. It still didn't have that pull out of the corners like the LMP1Hs did, but you know that's a fairy tale now. But they still feel like they are faster than the DPIs, depending on whether or not you look at a stopwatch or not. So yeah, I overall really like them in person. So I'm hoping that we get a little bit more race out of it, because it definitely did look like one OEM, specifically one team, had it completely wrapped up almost, as long as they didn't run into too much trouble, which they certainly tried at the front of the field. So
yeah, I mean, pretty much right off the bat, like the whole story was like, oh, Acura never did this much testing, they're not going to be competitive, they're going to have issues. It was quite the opposite. It wasn't. The number 60 car got pole and just never looked back. I mean, the Cadillacs, the two Chip Ganassi Cadillacs, really posed the challenge and made it a competitive race along with the Wayne Taylor car. With the Porsches were a little bit behind, but they're still able to at least make some attempts at like the minor positions. But it was pretty much just Acura, an Acura's race all day. BMW was kind of the lone one out with problems right in the beginning of the race. I believe they had to do an MGU replacement on that car. I believe it was the 25 they had to do it, and then the 24. I can't remember if the 24 had any issues except for pace. But yeah, BMW in the GTP class has definitely the most amount of work to do on par of being competitive. Porsche, like I said earlier, they're kind of behind, but they're still able to be somewhat competitive. Can't remember which car was which, but one had that. Can't remember what exactly it was, but it was like a battery failure. It's the thing that goes on the passenger side of the car where they have to replace that.
Mm.
And then the other one in the very, very early part of the morning, 3, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock maybe, where it went around the outside of a car to lap in the kink and just kind of went off in the grass and caused some damage to that car. So definitely in terms of GTP, Acura and Cadillac are definitely the most competitive, and I'm excited to see the upwards mobility of how because Porsche we know are going to have their stuff together because Penske perfect and whatnot. BMW already made itself the underdog story. They did some testing at Sebring this past week or so, along with the GTD Porsches, so I'd imagine it's for BOP data. And the BMWs, I believe, are still the last cars time-wise, so that'd be interesting how that goes. Let's go down below the food chain a bit. LMP2, with probably the closest finish in Rolex 24 history.
That was incredible. That's all I'm going to say with that. That was a chase down, and I mean, you pulled out the right time, had enough of the side draft, got just enough far ahead. I mean, if it was 20 feet, that line was 20 feet farther down, you would have seen, the 04 kind of catch back up on the inside. I mean, it was the perfect slingshot distance. It was really well timed, and you kind of didn't think it was going to happen too, because out of the bus stop, he didn't really look like he had enough momentum to do it. And honestly, I think he messed it up a little bit there. And if he did take that corner better, I think he might have made the move too early, potentially. So it ended up being a perfect run at the line. And I mean, yeah, it got to be gut wrenching for for the 04, but still, that was an incredible finish for LMP2.
And LMP2 was actually, because normally sometimes in IMSA, at least in the past couple of years, LMP2 was kind of like, oh, they're laps, between each other. This, however, wasn't the case. LMP2 was actually somewhat competitive throughout the entirety of the race, from what I remember. Obviously, it was a gut punch right in the beginning because of the Tower Events car with the Bus Bros lineup. Had some issues, I believe. It's like, can't remember, was it like coolant leaked onto something in the car? Mm-hmm. It was something along those lines where they take it behind the garage and get it fixed. And at the time that they got back on the track, they're like 11 laps down. But at the time the checkered flag came out, they're only like 2 laps down or something along those lines. So it was a massive comeback for that team.
Yeah, I mean, you saw those comebacks too a lot. There was a decent amount of safety cars. LMP3 was a complete mess. They had some engine issues, driver issues, car issues, just whatever contact. So there was quite a few safety cars. Brought the pack kind of closer and allowed those waiver rounds to get their laps back. I mean, GTD ended up, I believe, with 12 cars in the lead lap. On the lap, basically in that final hour. So they. There was going to be tight racing no matter what, especially at the end when you had that many cars still in contention.
LMP3, the point of contention for this race, many people who think it didn't belong. It was a lackluster race. I'll give them that, because there's a battle for the lead in the overnight portions, and then pretty much, I couldn't remember for the life. I think it might have been the Sean Creech car that had issues, and then pretty much right after that, whoever was in the catbird seat took the lead, and then with all the issues the LMP3 cars had, gave him that, I think it was like 11 lap lead or something.
Yeah, it was nuts. AWA basically walked away with it, but it wasn't necessarily that close. up until even like 2 hours to go. So it on the end result sheet, it looks a lot different than what it was in the race, but it was truly a race of attrition for LMP3.
And obviously, we talked a little bit about the GT, mainly about Porsche. Heart of Racing, Aston took the overall GT win with its win in GTD, and then WeatherTech Racing, the swan song for Cooper McNeil, wins his first Rolex in the GT Daytona Pro class.
It was a dream come true, Kris.
GT,
just a dream come true.
And then it's a shame because GT, it was good when we were able to see it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Hopefully we don't. I mean, I think it might be a taste of things to come with that. It's, the prototype class is going to be really interesting, but I really hope we don't avoid the GTD battles because I have a feeling they're going to be really intense this year.
Absolutely. And I know you're at the track, but I know some people who are at the track who are trying to get screens of the race in the infield. I think it would be very remiss if we didn't talk about broadcast.
Okay.
So people, if you're watching on the international feed, it was kind of frustrating where you would see all these battles for GT positions, but they would only show like a lone GTP car because that's what NBC wants to focus on. But from what I've heard from people who are watching on Peacock, I heard it was a nightmare.
I can't quote you on any of that. I know we did try to stream stuff from the NBC app, and we did get some of that on there, but we like for most of the race, at least maybe into the evening, like we just couldn't get any of the any stream to work. The data coverage was just soaked, which was also peculiar too because there's a whole huge Verizon 5G tower, like mobile tower thing that they had erected and just advertising the crap out of, and Verizon still was just the worst network to be on by far if you're at the track. So take note, heed everyone. But no, I haven't rewatched it yet. I've watched several parts of the international feed over again, but it wouldn't surprise me that it was terrible. In what way? I'm assuming just the commentators not knowing anything and them just constantly.
It was the ads.
Oh, was there a lot of ads? Oh yeah, right. Wasn't there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I had heard the ads were bad, but I didn't know anything more than that.
So just to give you an idea, so basically, when the NBC commentators kind of gave up for the night, and when Peacock was using just the IMSA radio guys, they even had commercials then. They cut out from the IMSA radio commentary to throw in more commercials.
Oh, good, because that's what I read. Yeah, well, I guess they thought the audience was sleeping, so they could sneak some subliminally in there, I guess. I have no idea. That's ridiculous. I mean, commercials, whatever. I mean, the Daytona 500 was last weekend, so I wanted to, but like that was just ridiculous with how many commercials were in that. Would you say there were more commercials on the Peacock stream than there were on the Fox stream for the Daytona 500 versus the Rolex 24? Because I don't know, man. That Daytona 500 coverage was ass.
I was one of the enlightened ones, and I watched on this thing that we nickname it the Allah stream.
Yes,
I don't know if you ever heard about that.
No, yeah, I do. I had what was it? I had some family over, and I couldn't stream that because they would freak out.
Oh,
but that's the best.
Right.
That's the best one to do because they don't go to commercial, and they just have what's her face do little updates for the pit road.
Jesse Punch.
Yes, that's it. I knew it had to be Dr. Punch or something like that. But yeah, I love that because you don't get any of the commercials. You get some background noise. Sometimes they don't even bring them on, so it's just like watching cars doing laps. It's great. Why can't all streams be like that?
I was going to say, for anyone who's unaware, if you're wanting to watch NASCAR coverage, adsports.ae. And the best part about it, it's completely legal. It's an official broadcaster of NASCAR, but it's just the stream is out there for anyone to watch.
It's perfect,
and it's commercial free.
That's the best part. Whenever I find a stream like that, I'm like, I gotta make sure that I know where this is at all times because it's my preferred method anyway. I would rather just get the satellite feeds of everything. So I remember back in the 90s in NASCAR, you could get those satellite feeds of the commentators just tooling around in commercial break. Anyway, so yeah, I definitely lost my train of thought. Where are we at, Kris?
We were talking about broadcasting, and then obviously we went to the Daytona 500. Yes. I think I remember Indecisive Rock, the person who you were with at the track. I remember him telling a story how they were trying to put on Peacock on the track, so they have like something as a feed, but then like the ads just too much, and he just gave up. Imagine the people watching at home on their couch when they're not at the racetrack, when they have any like all these other multiple of options for their entertainment.
Okay, I have one specific anecdote I will say. The amount of times I would be walking in the infield, and a lot of people have satellite, a lot of people have like better connections than I do to the internet or whatever, but I would assume a bunch of people have Peacock or just normal ways to get it. The amount of times I saw that damn waiting screen on everybody's, like whenever I just glance over, I would see the NBC, the Peacock, like, your program will be right back or whatever that thing said. I would see that everywhere. And it's not like I would be like, oh, wow, that's just a lot of commercials and whatever. I'd just be like, all right, like, why? This is, like if they're at a racetrack, I'm just so used to seeing like people's TVs and stuff to the race broadcast. But like for whatever reason, whenever I would look at this year's Rolex 24, I would always see that commercial thing. And it was weird because, Peacock is usually just, sure, we'll give you the full 24-hour stream. We're not doing anything. Here you go. And they definitely went a different route this year. So, I don't know. I'm not a fan, but maybe we'll just need that your stream you previously mentioned to fill in the gaps here for us eventually when they start broadcasting IMSA races. Man, I'm like derailing everything. Okay, so what's your next thought on the Rolex 24 besides the broadcasts? Did you like it? Were you a fan of the race?
I was definitely a fan of the race. I think, obviously, I wish they would have shown more than what they did. But me watching the IMSA, I had the IMSA TV feed on, so obviously I never had the quaints and complaints of Peacock that I had to suffer with it, basically. The new graphics are actually, they look pretty... It's a new facelift for the international coverage.
It's an improvement, which is those. Yep, no, it's an improvement, which is shocking. I was expecting worse, honestly. I had no problems with it. So,
I do think it looks a little bit better. I know people have problems with the huge roundel in the top left corner of the screen. But overall, the race, I think the hype. I do think the hype delivered. I think it was definitely for the LMP2 class, that's for sure. GTD and GTD Pro, those were battling all throughout the race. Obviously, WeatherTech had got the Swan Song victory for Cooper McNeil. I'm sure there's something other than because it's been almost a month since the race happened, so things have left my brain. Did Action Express get taken out by LMP3? Or did it take out an LMP3? What was the other? Do you remember?
Was it that they got rear-ended? Or was that one of the other Cadillacs? No, I think that was the yellow Cadillac that got rear-ended by an LMP2.
Oh, was it? I thought Action Express had some. But there's also this is when the race was going into night, where one of the Cadillacs had to replace their rear, the rear of the car, the rear bodywork, and you would see the cameras pan into the pits where they're actually replacing the rear bodywork that they had before because there's a parts shortage. Mm-hmm. And that's something I've never seen before, where the contents of the car that they took off to replace it, that they had to work on that, they had to work on that specific part. I'd never seen that before.
Yeah, it was, again, it's just like this specific time that it's going to be like this, and the deadline for them to get all this stuff done and ready for the race was not necessarily, it wasn't like they didn't have enough time, but everybody was on a really short schedule with a lot of things to get it all put together, and people knew ahead of time, especially for the weekend, before the race, that it was going to be tight if it came to lots of broken parts and a lot of different aero bits that might need to be replaced. They might not have extras. So it did not surprise me at all to see, especially early front and rear aero changes, especially off the GTP cars, and they got sent straight back to the garage just to get a little bit more retrofitted and just kind of keep cycling between two of them to, try to make both of them last as long as possible until one got damaged and you just ride with the other one. So it was really interesting to see that, and walking the pits too during the race, it was clear that there were definitely lots of missing places where parts usually are or not, and you could definitely tell that a lot of them were being repaired right there to get them back out and running. So it was pretty crazy looking at the part shortage for some of the cars in the categories.
I think we hit on pretty much the major points of this year's Rolex 24. I can't remember if anything major happening.
Michelin Pilot Sport Challenge, that was a pretty good race.
Harrison Burton, and who was the teammate? Was it Zane Smith who got the win that race?
The Mustang that was good. I mean, they definitely drove that thing very well, and it again performed very well at Daytona. That thing is got great straight line speed, so it's that brute American horsepower. But it wasn't like I won't say that was like the most spectacular race, but it was a perfectly great opener to the series. Nothing crazy too much. MX5 races were great as usual. Some accidents here or there, but beyond that, nobody had anything serious. So honestly, to escape away from this weekend with no injuries is good. Except for there was definitely some stuff going on in the Roar, but beyond that. It was good to have a good Rolex 24, especially weather-wise. And, yeah, like I said, the crowds were just fantastic. And I'm ready to do it again next year, hopefully. We'll see how it goes. But I know we've got Sebring coming up, so I got to prepare for that first.
Yeah, yep. And next time you will hear us will be a preview of Super Sebring, along with a quick review of what happened in the Asian Le Mans Series and the Kyalami 9-hour. Other than that, I think we said what we need to do on this piece. I think it's time to take this over on the other half of the world.
Sounds good. Oh yeah, I'll also be doing the MX5. I'll do a little recap of the MX5 race at St. Pete too for our next preview episode. So
this upcoming weekend.
Yep.
Actually, the weekend after that we're recording this, it's going to be the St. Petersburg Grand Prix, which features Mazda MX5 Cup and GT America, which will kick off the SRO America season, and Cookie will have his reports from there as well.
Yes, I'll file my reports with paper and make the paper ruffling noises as per the usual norms. So, all right. Anyway, we're gonna turn it upside down now. See y'all. Gazoo.
Great. Gazoo.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to part 2 of this wrap-up episode. We're going back down under, so of course it is me, Michael Zolivari, and I'm joined with Kiwi Kris Riddell. Welcome back, Kiwi.
Hey, Michael, and you've got Junior Riddell here, just chipping along in my hair in the background. Sorry for that.
It's fine. It's a part of being part of the family now, right? She's officially part of the family. Exactly. She's on the podcast.
Royalties too, right?
Royalties? You're getting royalties?
Well, she is now.
Oh, okay, lucky her. We're here to talk about Bathurst, the Bathurst 12-hour, of course, which was at the beginning of the month. And all things considered, Kris, it was quite a cool race.
It was. Okay, yes, the grid was probably slightly down on numbers in previous years, as we, alluded to numerous times. It's still a good sign. But the race itself was an untypical Bathurst, but still a very enjoyable one.
Well, yeah, it was something that we've not been really used to seeing at Bathurst. But the thing that I always find, and the thing that all the international people who come here always find, is that the track itself is what turns it on, and that was 100% what was happening. Now, we're going to do this a little differently. What's going to happen is that Kris is actually going to be asking me the questions this time around. And so, Kris, you have the floor.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to touch on, and I picked this up on TV, and you were there, so you would have picked it up in person. The atmosphere of this weekend looked absolutely phenomenal, even more so than previous 12 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
The crowd numbers looked way up. The weather just turned it on. It looked absolutely amazing.
And I think those were the key things, particularly with the weather. It was like warm, but not like 2020 where it was boiling hot. I think that might have kept a few people away, whereas the fact that it was just like 25 degrees all weekend was just perfect. They said, I wasn't sure on the exact details, but they said that it was a attendance record over the weekend of something like 53,000 people, which is
48 or something close to that.
Yeah, which was like 10,000 people more than the last time that they ran it with the international field. So that's just like the atmosphere, the crowds in the paddock on the hill, the fact that on the Friday you had like visiting school children there, just as like in the paddock, getting an experience of it and sitting out on the hill at Hell Corner, just, you know, soaking in that atmosphere and being really excited about it. Like I could hear them on top of the media center on the pit lane, like just screaming their lungs out every single time a car went past. The atmosphere was just so, like, it's so Bathurst. It felt so much bigger than it had in the past.
Yeah, and that school kid thing, you know, that's how I got my first experience in motorsport in this country, going to a Nations Cup thing at Sandown.
Really?
Years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Got to sit on the pit building with Sandown one Friday with a school outing.
That's really, really cool. And I actually had a chance to talk to the director of the event about it, because that was something that he put in for this year. And he had a great quote, which I'm probably not going to get exactly right, but he said it's about getting those fans of tomorrow, creating the fans of tomorrow. And I think, you know, obviously it worked for you.
Yeah, it definitely worked for me. Here I am now, 17 years later.
Gosh.
I know, right? Makes me feel old. But that's just the sort of stuff that motorsport needs to keep doing. You know, just it costs them nothing, apart from maybe a few bottles of water. And it gives the kids an experience they won't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really started the weekend off on a really, really good note, having all those kids there as well.
Yeah. And then you get down to Saturday, Sunday, crowds just like we haven't seen for the 12 hour before. And I'm sure the noise was incredible. I sort of picked that up on TV as well.
It had a real amphitheater feeling behind it. And as well, like in the paddock, in the signing sessions, it looked like it was the 1000. Just certain garages were getting absolutely mobbed. And of course, there was a very specific Italian motorbike rider who had a, you know...
Valentino Rossi.
Yeah, legions and legions and legions of his own fans. I actually took a photo. I'm not sure if I'll share it at the moment, but I took a photo of the lineup to get Rossi's signature during the signing session. So at Bathurst, in the pit lane, there's these 4 towers that are basically equidistant, like a quarter of the way down each section of the paddock. So the WRT pits where Rossi was right next to Tower 2, and the line, right, went like out towards Tower 1 for about 50 meters, looped back to the edge of the paddock, which is about a 20-30 meter loop, and then kept going back towards Hell Corner all the way through to the next tower. So it was literally like half the pit lane was just people lining up to get Rossi's signature. It was kind of nuts.
That's insane. Because I can picture that in my mind because I know where those towers are, and holy cow.
Yeah, it was a not insignificant amount of people. It did mean that some of the other garages that were in that little mix had a few less people, so it was a nice chance to catch up with the Groves and with some of the Audi guys. But yeah, no, the Rossi fever was 100% on show.
Yeah, and that came up through the TV as well. But just the other parts of the atmosphere, like the corporate areas, the hospitality areas, all looked amazing because Brits was in those every 2 hours or every 20 seconds, it seemed, on the broadcast.
He's got the best gig, I swear to God.
Oh, yeah. Just go have a champagne here, a beer here. Oh, barbecue time, sweet.
Living the dream.
Yeah, it just looked like an amazing day out. Made me realise I'd made the wrong mistake by having a family.
Oh, that's... Yeah. You should bring them next time. I
will win this. She's not going to lose her eardrums.
Yeah, that's fair. Another thing I wanted to mention as well, having the F1 car as well, that was really, really cool.
Yeah, damn you, Channel 7, for going to an ad break in that, and Foxtel for losing the transmission somehow. But that looked and sounded phenomenal.
That's actually...
And the fact that Liam Lawson actually gave it a bit of willy.
Just a little bit.
He could have gone so much faster, but...
That's true. I mean, he was doing burnouts at, like, Murray's Corner and Hell Corner to intentionally fudge the lap time, but, like, that's the first time I've seen a modern F1 car in person, like, in anger, and, mate, just the way that it sounded, the way that it moved, it was just phenomenal. I went up and stood on top of the pit building when it was coming down the chase, and, woo-wee, that sound was crazy.
Pure V8.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hopefully it's not the last time we see Liam Lawson in an F1 car, but I digress.
That's a different discussion for a different podcast.
That's a different... We're doing a different podcast. Anything else about the atmosphere that really stood out to you over the weekend?
It seemed like the activation was really well done. So, like, the welcome pavilion with all these special cars, the cars and caffeine sort of stuff. Just like talking to people in and around the paddock, it felt like it just had this buzz and excitement, and that was kind of absent last year because of the circumstances of the event being pro-am and mostly Australian based. It didn't really have that sort of like buzz, whereas like the whole weekend, like with Rossi around, with the F1 car around, with the friggin' Nissan GTR clocking 330 kilometers per hour in the straight in one of the support category events, like God Almighty, just everywhere you looked there was something cool happening. That was
pretty sure that's a Skyline that can empty its tank in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Empty its oil sump in 10 minutes as well.
Yeah, and ran out of driving talent in 5.
Still though, to have the speed record down Conrod Straight, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, so much so that the organisers have gone, not again.
Whoops.
So he's no longer allowed to race that car. Oh, well, that's fine. So I think we'll move on from atmosphere because we know how it looks in the broadcast. And it's good to see that the atmosphere of this place is coming back to where it should be for the 12-hour. The weekend was solid for me for a few reasons, though.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was for you. What was your greatest disappointment from this weekend?
Oh, there's one or two. I'd say... Audi, their pro car, they just never seemed to be in it, and when they finally got in it, they got in the wall during the race.
Yes.
And the Invitational Class...
It's entirely his fault.
It's 50-50. And then en masse, the Invitational Class, just, that was rough. To have five or six cars initially and then be down to one running member after like half distance was just it's hard with that class because you want them to do well and to feature, but they're just
they're Friday, Saturday. We should mention thoughts with Keith Suzuki. He's still recovering from that absolute monster.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it was definitely a brake failure. We don't know exactly what happened, but to see the car that far away from the barrier on its roof after hitting the barrier, that's freaking scary.
That's absolutely terrifying. I actually had a chat to one of the drivers of the other Mark car, Jeff Taunton, and he said that it was exactly the same brakes and rotors that they'd put on all the other cars. It just seemed that one had a fault and like exploded. So the report back that they got was that there was no brake pressure when he put his foot down. So that they're still in the process of determining the actual culprit and whether or not that was exactly what went on. But that was what they seemed to suspect, and completely destroyed that chassis. Just the front half of the car just didn't exist, and it was a wonder that he was able to get out without serious injury. Obviously he's still recovering, but like it could have been so much worse.
Yes, and also having more spectators jump over the fence again.
That's a complicated one. That was a really complicated one because I saw... Now, I'm actually going to try and find it. V8 Sleuth, which is Aaron Noonan, did an article, about where they actually identified and found the guy who jumped the fence. And it turns out that he didn't want to be identified and he wanted to stay anonymous, but it turns out that he was someone with marshalling experience. And I'm not encouraging anyone in any situation to jump the fence onto a live racetrack, but of all the people who could have, that's probably this, like, with, you know, recovery and medical experience, it's probably the best sort of person to have done so.
It's not Joe Blogs with a fire extinguisher like we had last time.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Yeah, so again, absolutely not encouraging it, absolutely not condoning it, but in this specific instance, the person who did identified a need and filled it, which is like okay, but it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, especially when there's not as much danger as there was. Like, okay, car's on its roof, yeah, sure. But there's no fire, there's no imminent danger.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I'll see if I can find the article itself and post it somewhere. But yeah, it wasn't. Yeah. It was it's hard. It's one of those hard things.
But yeah, the other cars in that class as well. Did you see the Sin incident?
Yes, I did see the Sin incident. I in fact talked to the driver as well after that one.
Yeah, because it wasn't on broadcast, but there was a 7-second TikTok video that made it onto Twitter, because through TikTok.
Yeah.
It was a pretty violent incident as well.
Yeah, it seemed to be very similar to similar in magnitude, not necessarily similar in how it started. Incident to how Sam Shaheen and Tyler Everingham came to grief a few years ago at that particular part of the track. The driver said to me that he just brought the throttle up a little too early and then lost the rear on the curb, and hit the wall and almost went over the top of the wall. Lucky to stay within bounds.
Yeah.
And that's a shame too, because that car had struggled with engine problems all day on Friday, and they changed the engine overnight, and it was like the second session of the day. They just completely binned it, so it was really unfortunate.
And then, of course, you had the Crossbow that blew its engine so hard it turned into an Audi R8.
I love it when they get reincarnated like that.
Yeah, it's just a shame that Jada missed out as a result, but at least they were able to make the race.
Yeah, and they got a Silver Cup podium out of it as well, which is pretty exciting.
And good work on that. I mean, you can't scoff at that, even if it is Silver Cup.
It's still a class podium at the Bathurst 12 Hour.
Exactly. But yeah, overall, the racing in the I-Class, you had the Mark Mazda and the GT4 Merc that was just a problem child all race. I don't think TV even showed them after hour 4.
They did the classic wrap up with about 20 minutes left after all the overall stuff had died down, and I think that was the most TV time that the Mark car had gotten all weekend.
Yeah.
And that's a shame. And like, I'd love to see the Invitational Class, or even like the B Class. I'd love to see Carrera Cup come back and really fill out the grid, because I think one of the great things about the Bathurst and the 12 Hour is having those slower cars that you have to navigate through over the top. And if you're not going to have a lot of them and it's just a GT3 event, well, it kind of, reduces that flavour of it, I think. And like, especially with the Mark cars as well, they've been around for so long at the event. It would be a real shame to ever see them not feature.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there is a Mark GT coming as well, so a brand new Mark car.
Oh, I did not know that.
Apparently, in 2023, some point they've built 3 of them, I believe, so far.
Cool.
So keep an eye out for that. It's a bespoke. It's not based on anything. It's just a bespoke car, essentially.
Nice. I'm keen to see what they do with that, because that'll be.
Yeah.
They have a good track record for building good cars.
That's according to Jeff Taunton's website, anyway.
Yep.
So we'll see where that ends. The other big disappointment for me was, I think, around the end of the race, but we're coming to that later, because that deserves its own airtime.
Absolutely.
So, with that out of the way, we're talking about some positives. What was your biggest surprise from the weekend?
That's a great question. I am not sure. I think. Well, okay, clearly the biggest surprise from the weekend is the fact that Sun Energy 1 went back to back. Like, that's stupid.
Spoilers.
I mean, yeah, well, obviously if they're listening to this review, they know that happened. But the fact that Kenny Hibble has 2 Bathurst wins, and one of them in an all-pro class, like, that's stupid.
Yeah, that's insane. Has he done his nudie run yet?
I wasn't, privy to the nudie run, unfortunately, no. By that point, I had tried to go to bed because I'm not sure how many people know this. I did post it on my personal socials. I was sick. Like, I was as sick as a dog the whole weekend. So I was, like, nauseous, headaches, like, could not, like, operate properly throughout the whole weekend. And there I am in the media centre trying to do work for Daily Sports Car and going to these friggin' media round tables with all the drivers and the series, like the event directors and all that sort of stuff, and just, like, on absolute fumes. I finally started feeling better during the race, and then because I was sitting down in the same spots for so long, I threw my back out. So that was my story of the weekend.
Oh.
Yeah, it was going back to Sydney and to fly back home the next day was the worst. But like, so I wasn't really keeping track of a lot of like sub stories, unfortunately. I think, yeah, the biggest surprise, of course, is the overall result. And yeah, just like that's a ridiculous story.
And I think that highlights something that we didn't really touch on in the preview, and the Groves were also trying to exploit this, I think, and they probably would have had they seen longer in the race. If you're in pro class, you got no bronze driver requirement apart from meeting the absolute minimum, which is what, an hour 40.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the flip side of that. You only need to do enough so that way the other drivers don't exceed their maximum. So yeah, it was and that was in the rulebook, and they played that to perfection. I mean, Lucas Stoltz and Jules Yunon were absolutely smashed by the end of it, but they knew what they were getting into, and they got through it.
They were smashed with the Bathurst 12-hour trophy. They'll take that any day of the week.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely back to back.
Yeah. For me, one of the biggest surprises, and it's probably on me for potting him so much, but Brock Feeney.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
He had a great weekend.
100%.
He was the absolute fastest in that car.
Yeah, and that was a bit of a surprise. He's only done 5 races in GT machinery. 3 of them have been at Bathurst. But he is seriously impressed in that car, in that Mercedes, every single time he's jumped into that car. And I reckon there was a hot rumor going around that wouldn't be substantiated by anyone, that Shane was unwell or unfit in some capacity, which is why Brock got a lot of running, because Shane looked all at sea in that car.
Yeah, he seemed all at sea, unceremoniously all at sea. Like, he didn't even do qualifying.
And that was a real surprise, because normally, if you've got Shane Van Gisbergen in a car, you want him to do qualifying.
Yeah. And I don't think we'll ever know the true reason. But yeah, it was just odd. Other surprises Other surprises for me, I think it was more of a disappointment. It seemed like the crowd favourites go out fairly early as well. It was a shame to see us lose CL's car and the Grove car early on. There were some other surprises.
I'm trying to remember what happened to the 222.
It had a Scotty Taylor off, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they hit the wall coming down through the S's. The S's were a popular spot for people to have mistakes, as per usual.
Oh, that really bizarre one that involved the
Mark Feeney, was it the Hallmark car?
No,
the Superbike car and the Valmont racing car. Yeah. So
yeah, that was bizarre.
So I reckon that Cameron was very unlucky there. Because that is that's mostly a passing opportunity if you're trying to lap traffic. You go down the inside on the Skyline, and on Skyline if you've got a willing partner, and it looked like I think it was James Kunduris, but don't quote me on that one, in the car at the time, opened up to let that happen. But, you know, there was a shot of them going side by side over the top of Skyline, and then the next shot is, Cameron in the wall and Kundura's facing backwards. So I wonder if either Cameron's got it wrong and just taken out the Superman car in the process, or the Superman car wasn't aware of his presence or something, because it looked really weird because, the Valmont car was leading silver at that point in time as well.
Yeah.
So a bit of an odd one on that respect.
Very odd one. Also surprising for me to see just how well Valentino Rossi actually did.
Yeah. It was.
He acquitted himself incredibly well, considering it's his first time at this place. And how many GT3 races has he done? Not many.
He's done a year, but the year was mostly in the Audi, so he's only done 2 races in the BMW. I was very lucky as part of the media to be able to go to a roundtable discussion with the BMW drivers, and of course Rossi was the key part of that and got a lot of attention. But the way that he spoke about driving the car was very professional, of course, because he's a professional rider for MotoGP for a long time, so he has that experience. But the way that he was talking about building into the lap pace and feeling comfortable and leaving a margin was actually like, real race driver stuff. So he certainly did himself a big favor, not a favor. He
showed he's got the chops.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for translating my brain.
Yeah. Anytime. Also surprised that the 99, the boost car, maybe it's just Triple Eight went on this weekend, but they were nowhere.
Well, it was odd because at times that car was the fastest in practice, particularly at the hands of Stanaway. But I think that having Prince Jeffrey Ibrahim, who's not the best of the bronze drivers, I'd probably put him outside of the top 4 or 5 of Australian bronze drivers. Any extended drive time that he has to do was always going to handicap them, especially in comparison to the likes of Liam Talbot or Brad Schumacher. So yeah, it was just one of those ones. And then, I think as the heat of the day came up, the Triple Eight car kind of dropped off. So I think that was the tipping point there.
I think the Beamers had the same problem. They were great early on, and then they sort of faded away late.
Yeah,
apart from that, I thought the Beamers race was pretty much bang on.
Well, yeah, they made a small adjustment on the morning, but I think I think that every team had a chance to show their strengths. It was just a matter of maybe the Mercedes' strength was a bit stronger than everyone else.
Yeah, and that happens.
Yeah.
So with that in mind,
shall we address the elephant in the room?
Yes, we should.
Before we do that, though, I want to mention I want to mention one thing. The pace of the weekend was ridiculous.
Lap record in qualifying, so much green flag running.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts, and I'm not sure if it's to do with the conditions of the weekend and the development of GT3, or because it was the first time with the new Pirelli P0DHF spec tyre, but like a two flat in qualifying in the shootout rather. Oh my god! Like when that happened, the media center just burst. Like absolutely, it was ridiculous.
I can imagine it would have. What was the lap time when we went at 2:01.4?
It was I think it was a 2. So the previous lap record in qualifying, was a 2:01.5. So I think even Brock Feeney's lap was going to be a new lap record. But the problem was Maro Engel just done a freaking 2 flat.
2 flat with an 8. Which
it was
so not crypt diver, smashed the barrier.
That's redonkulous, like absolutely redonkulous. And then as you said, 4.5 hours, 4 minutes, 4 hours 45 rather of green flag running. The fastest rate, average speed of like 100 a ridiculous amount of speed. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but they did 2006 kilometers over the course of 12 hours. Like that's
323 laps.
That's ridiculous. Like actually ridiculous.
Yeah. Brings to the point like how fast is too fast for these cars, but that's a question for another day. So shall we address this elephant in the room?
Sure, let's do it. Do you want to tell the story or should I?
Well, we can both tell the story. So it starts with about 2.5, 3 hours to go with news that the Group M car had a faulty modem. For those who don't know what that is, it basically is what relays cars' BOP data, and I think is linked in with the safety system as well at Bathurst.
Yes, so it's part of the flag in the cab system. So it is a required piece of kit. So if it's not working, it's not working.
Required piece of kit, required and provided by the race organisers. If it's not working, you need to fix it. It wasn't working, so Group of them had to come and fix it. They got... Now, I find this unbelievable. They got dispensation to actually fix that part while fueling the car. And I find that a bit crazy.
Okay, why?
Because... Why? You wouldn't do it in any other situation.
That's fair.
Just because it's a lead card, you can't give them some slack. I don't like making one rule for situational racing.
Okay, I think that's fair. However, I would suggest that because it is a part supplied by the organisers, and the work that they were doing to repair that or replace that was not interfering with the refueling, I think that a special dispensation was appropriate to be made in that situation. Because it's not about a performance upgrade or or them gaining an advantage. It's them minimizing a disadvantage, which was not of their doing. So I can understand the series giving them dispensation in that specific instance.
Okay, fair enough. So they came in and they replaced that part. Do it. What, they lose about, I think it's 30 seconds on top of a normal pit stop?
Yeah.
Yep. So they did replace it relatively quickly. They end up back in second place. About, correct me if I'm wrong, 15 seconds down the road?
Yeah, so...
Behind the 75.
So yeah, what happened there was that because of the time loss in the pits, the 75 was then able to make their pit stop after the 999 had done so, elected to not take tyres and came out with track position. I think it was about 8 seconds ahead. So that is I think the key crux of things here is that without the additional time to replace the modem, Group M wouldn't have been in a position where they were behind, like at all.
Yeah.
So then things get complicated. More complicated, rather.
It's just slightly. So the cars were coming in towards the last hour and a bit of the race. Maro Engel was right on the tail of the 75. Coming into the chase. Looks like he's going to make a move. Doesn't. Backs out. Next lap. Feigns another move. Backs out again. It's just a matter of time. You think he's going to try something and put his nuts on the line to try and pass the car. He does that the next lap. Gets it. Very wrong. Since the 75 spinning, drive-through penalty.
And that's all she wrote. That was the controversy of the race, really.
I'm probably understanding a bit just how big it was, but... So do you think the penalty in that case was fair?
I think it was fair that they got a penalty. I don't think a drive-through was appropriate. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I don't think a drive-through reflected the extent of what a penalty should have been applied. However, the race stewards' hands were tied, effectively. The only penalty they could give, if they were going to give a penalty, was a drive-through, and I don't think you could get away from giving a penalty in that instance.
You can't give a black and white warning flag for that.
And, as well, they couldn't give a post-race time penalty. And the reason for that is because the Bathurst 12-hour rules and regulations don't stipulate that you can. It's different with supercars. If it was a supercars event, they would have been able to give a careless driving 15-second penalty, or reckless, or however they would have described it. But because it was run under the GT World Challenge rules, the Intercontinental GT Challenge rules, they could not do that. So the only penalty that they could apply was a drive-through.
Yep.
And
which is fair enough, because supercars, you can have an effect on a championship. You can't really do that for a one-off endurance race.
Yeah, I mean, IGTC technically isn't a one-off, but it's a one-off. What surprised me about the whole instance, though, is that at no point did it look like Engel was going to redress. Like, I would have thought that would have been the simplest solution in that instance. You redress the penalty, you let him back past, and then you go again.
Yeah.
So that surprised me.
It was a very DTM style of, okay, you're gone, bye.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the incident itself.
Yep.
Now, do you think Engel was entirely to blame?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, without question.
Without question? Okay, I reckon it's more like 70-30.
It was Stoltz at the time, wasn't it?
It was Gunon.
Don't worry. It was Gunon, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you reckon Gunon took the corner from him?
I don't reckon Maro was going to get the pass done cleanly, but I also don't think Gunon left him enough room. Because obviously when you come through the chase and you shape up to make a move, like, you are committed. Once you hit that breaking point, there's no way that you can slow down faster. So Engel is sent it from deep, sure. But clearly Jules isn't just going to let Gunon do that, let Engel do that. However, the way that Jules arrowed himself towards the apex really took away any wiggle room that Engel had. And that's why I think he went up on the curb, and that's why there was, that extended contact that made him spin. Very similar situation, I think, to the Jamie Whincup, Scott McLaughlin incident. However, I think in that instance, Gunon was under control of his car. Engel was under control of his car the whole time, whereas in the supercars instance, Whincup was not. So, could Engel and Gunon have gotten around that corner without making contact? Probably. But, as Jules Gunon said in the post-race press conference, I think to win Bathurst, you'd give away your mother. So,
yes.
Obviously, he knew what he was doing.
Yes, Mrs. Gunon, you're being adopted. See, I think you're being a little bit harsh on Gunon there.
Okay.
Because look at the point of contact, and look at the fact that Engel was over the curb at that point.
Well,
the point of contact was really in the rear.
I don't think Engel gets over the curb.
At no point.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I don't think Engel gets over the curb if Gunon doesn't close the door. I think if Gunon doesn't intentionally take an early apex, then Gunon has room to maneuver his front bias off the curb, and they'd be making more side-to-side contact. It's one of those things when you realize that the door's getting closed in front of you, you try to back out, and that makes it worse because now you're hitting them in the rear and you're going over the curb. You see it all the time. That's my thought.
The fact that he was that far back, though, would that suggest that at no point should he have thought he had any entitlement to that corner?
Oh, absolutely not. I think the penalty is entirely warranted, but I think had Engel had a willing partner, they could have gotten around the corner and continued the battle. That's my view on it.
It's the old Jimmy Broadbent's self-preservation sort of thing. You know you're going to have a crash, just back out of it.
Well, I mean, do you though in the last throws of the Bathurst 12 hour?
Yeah, that's fair. Especially if you're coming into your 150-minute drive time limit.
Yeah, that's true. And this is a chance to go 3 in a row, or to win your first if you're Engel, because he's been on the podium here 4 or 5 times. He's won that might be a stretch. I know that he's won the Allenson Simonson Award twice, and this place hates him. The race hates him. Every time he's been in a race-winning position, something has gone horribly wrong.
Yeah. It's also good to note he drove completely angry after this, because what was the final margin between him and the leader?
I think it was 1.9 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you got in front of me, 1.41.
1.41, there you go. And that was with second place in the middle of that as well.
Yeah. I do want to touch on that last little battle, because had it been a 12.5-hour race, or 12-hour 10-minute race, I reckon Matty Campbell would have taken the win.
I disagree. I don't think the Porsche had the beans. No, they seemed very I don't know, content isn't the right word, but they weren't defeated either. They were like, we got the maximum out of the car. Like, there was no way that we could have done anything more to try and pass. Because I think the 75 in particular was just a bit too strong on the straights.
That showed because Matty Campbell did actually hit the fence on his way up.
Yeah,
and parked towards the end of the race.
Exactly. I think if it had been a 12-hour and 10-minute race, the 999 would have won. Because that's how fast Engel was going at the end of that race.
Actually, knowing this race, it probably would have been a 32 that would have won because they would have taken each other out.
Yeah, it was getting to that point as well.
Yeah. But no, that finish, it wasn't like that last 30 minutes wasn't the most banging barging, but still intense. And that's what I love about this place. Even if you're not door banging, you know they're going as hard as they can.
And yeah, that's typical of Bathurst, isn't it?
It is.
I wanted to have a quick chat about the post-race press conference, if that's okay.
Yes.
So
I wasn't there, so this is your domain.
Yeah, so of course, after they do all the podium celebrations, the three winning the podium drivers come into the press room and there's a press conference. Now, there was a lot of interesting things said in that press conference, but the thing that I want to focus most on was the vibe. It was the most awkward press conference I think I've ever been a part of. And of course, that was all because of the contact between Gunon and with Engel. Now, I want to make this point because just a week earlier, like not even a week earlier, like a week minus 12 hours earlier, they won the Daytona 24 Hours in GT Pro together. Like,
yeah.
So they were a week ago in a car winning a Rolex, and then a week later making contact to, for one person to win a race and one person to lose a race. And the first thing Jules said,
best of enemies.
Well, that's the thing. They were, that both of them were saying like, we are good friends, and this is awkward. And the first thing that Jules said as soon as he got out the car was, "I'm sorry that we made contact. Like, I'm not sorry that we won. I'm sorry that we made contact." It was just a very weird vibe in that room. And of course, Engel was steaming. Marciello, he said one sentence the entire press conference, and the sentence was, "I promised Mercedes I wouldn't give them any bad PR, so I'm not going to speak." That was the only thing he said in the entire press conference.
Yeah, because they were all filthy, not the other teams in the penalty, but they were filthy at the organisers for making them change that modem.
Yeah, and I think that's fair enough. But it's racing. If they didn't have to change the modem, they would have won the race. But I want to focus on one particular thing that happened. So Jules was asked about the contact. He was asked does he think it was a racing incident or all those sort of things. And Jules said, I went for it. I tried to defend it. And yeah, as I said earlier, he said, it's a really awkward situation, but I think to win Bathurst, you'd give away your own mother. So that's what happened. That's what I did today.
Yeah.
The really interesting thing, though, was Kenny Habul then chimed in. And he said this immortal quote, which I'm probably going to try and find a way to expand into an article. He said, "I'm the one who owns the car. It's my car. And to be honest, when we were leading the race and I saw my car backwards in the grass, I wasn't upset because that is what I expect these guys to be doing to win this race. He has to do that. That's what he does. Sometimes it's teammates and that's what they do, but that's what I want them to do." So it kind of shows as well.
That's epic.
Yeah, like these guys are being pit against each other as factory drivers, but they're very good friends off the track and they've worked together a lot of the times. And as I said, they won Daytona the week before, and yet here they are having to throw that all out the window and throw machines at each other to try and win this race. It is a really complex little situation. And yeah, it made the press conference just awkward as anything. Like the 75 crew were trying not to celebrate. The 999 crew were absolutely steaming. And the Porsche guys were there just like, well, we're here, I guess.
We're here. We're spent.
Yeah.
So shall we wrap this up then?
Yeah. Let's. What other things? What other stories can I tell? As we're wrapping it up. Silver Cup. I was not Silver Cup. Sorry, Pro Am. I was a little bemused that none of the Pro Am guys actually managed to get into the top flight and really make their name for themselves. I guess that is in part due to how the race went. If there'd been more safety cars, there would have been more wave rounds. But yeah, I was a little disappointed that that didn't occur because I was so on board for either the Chaz Mostert 65 car with Talbot and Ross, or the 777 Shaheen fella and Mies. I thought it was Mies. Car like to get into the mix at some point. Like they, the fact that Audi only turned up with one pro car and that got dumped in the first hour of the race, and I've forgotten his name completely, but the head of Audi Sport Customer Racing was like, we got dumped out of this race.
Yeah, no, you didn't.
Yeah,
you dumped yourself.
Yeah, it was one of those where, like, again, self-preservation. At that point in the race, you shouldn't turn down on someone who's got their nose up on the inside at Griffin's Bend. Anyway, if they put fella Mies and one of the other pros, whether it be like who else they have now, like what they had Haase, they had Fabian Schiller. No, did they? I can't even remember. It's so long ago.
Oh, they could have just put Fafas, Martin, and Fella in a car.
Yeah, like absolutely. Like Fella on point was the fastest driver on track. They could have put Ricardo Fella, Christopher Mies, and friggin' Chaz Mostert in a car together.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
It seemed dumb. It seemed dumb because all the other pro cars ran faultlessly, effectively.
Yeah.
So I was a little bemused by that. And then Silver Cup. I honestly I can't. Oh yeah, that's right. The Kiwis one. Gross.
And Ross Palakis second place. Another big tick for him.
Well, I was very impressed by that because he was a lot faster than his teammates. And I didn't think that car would be anywhere near the mix in that class. But hey, as it shows, like he's still getting a lot better. He's still learning. He's still getting a lot better. So yeah.
I mean, that was aided by a couple of silver cars having really dumb accidents too.
I mean, that's true, but you got to be in it to win it.
To finish second first, you got to finish.
Yeah, exactly. And probably the best equipped car, the Valmont car, didn't. And that's that.
Exactly. And of course, the Invitational Class, last man standing in the Mark III Mazda.
Pretty much.
Mark III Mazda. Yeah. But overall, I'd give the rest a solid 3.5 to 4 stars.
Yeah, it was a slow burn, but in the best way possible.
Yeah, it's 3.5. If we're doing it properly, 3.5 to 4 Pirellis.
Oh, gross. That works. What do we expect from this event for next year? What things should we expect the Bathurst 12 hour to be next year?
Bigger grid. Same or if not more spectators. Hopefully a bigger IMB classes or more competitive IMB classes. And hopefully some new spec cars.
Ooh. Who is in the process of releasing new specs cars? Of course, the Ferrari 296.
Mm-hmm.
The new Porsche.
And the new Porsche. Both will be down here next year.
Fingers crossed.
And hopefully we'll have some news for 2025 about an Audi replacement because that's getting tired.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that the Audis were running the R8 in the first GT3 Bathurst 12 hour back in friggin' 2011.
Yeah. About time for an update, guys.
Yeah, well, what did they go to? That's a whole different other podcast, actually.
Yeah.
I want to add to that, more pro cars from international teams. And that's going to be hard because of where it's positioned in the calendar. And in fact, the event director was talking about possibly moving it back a week to enable teams from America to not have to do the Daytona double.
Not the worst idea. I had the sacrilegious idea of swapping the 12 hour and 1000 dates.
That is sacrilegious. How dare you? Just run the 1000 as a one-off before the season starts in the brand new cars.
Yeah. God, imagine Gen 3's first outing being at the Mount.
Oh, don't terrify me. So, yeah, I think if we see a pro class next year of between 12 and 15 cars with 6 manufacturers, I reckon that'll be a big tick. And because I think that will be the next sort of series of baby steps for this event, is to get back to where it was in 2020, where we had 39 cars, 23 of them pro from 11 manufacturers. So, like, that's a huge way to go to get there. But I think if we aim for like 12 to 15 from 6 manufacturers next year, that's a good spot.
Agreed.
Yeah. And if everything goes as well as it did this weekend, it'll be great. Hopefully I won't be sick next time.
Yeah, please don't.
Oh, dude, it was gross. It was so gross. I felt awful, and it sucked. It's always a bit concerning when you walk into the media center and meet people for the first time, and their first thing is, "Are you okay? Like, you don't look all that well."
Yeah, but that's your normal operation.
Wow. Rude.
Are you okay? Days coming up.
This is true. No, it's always coming up. It's in like September. Gosh.
We're derailing. Shall we end this?
We should. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Kris.
No problem. Pleasure's all mine. And Phoebe's.
And Phoebe's. Yes, we did hear her squeak a few times in that one. Thank you all very much for listening. Thank you for the American contingent doing the Daytona wrap-up, which I trust they've done a very good job of. And yeah, we will see you again on Endurance Chat very, very soon, because before we know it, the European season is going to start, and boy howdy, there goes the rest of our time. In the meantime, we'll see you next time. I'm Mike Cazzalaveri. Peace out!